Welcome to the Running Coaches Connection podcast. This is Coach Rondell Ruff, head coach at the Ann Arbor Skyline Track and Field and Cross Country for the women. Thanks for taking the time to listen to us today. On this podcast, we're very lucky to have two outstanding coaches take some time out of their evenings to chat it up with me. We have Rondell Ruff, head coach of Wayne State women's track and field and men's and women's cross country, and we also have Rohan Grant, founder and head coach of the Maveric Track Club, as well as assistant coach in charge of sprints at CFS Farm School in Philadelphia, Pennsylvania. I was really excited to sit down and talk with these guys and really pick their brain on a lot of different topics. Ended up being a very long 3 hour conversation filled with nothing but outstanding information. In this first installment, we spent a little bit of time just getting to know each other, talking about our running backgrounds and how we got involved in the sport as athletes and as coaches, as well as talking about the difficult task of coaching outside of your discipline. Hope you guys enjoy.
Were you one of the kids that got that running start early, on the club circuit, or were you kind of a late? I just
I
got
was a
going
late
in high
bloomer.
school. Yeah.
I was a late bloomer in high school. I was actually probably a lot like a young lady that you have on your team now. I was found in a gym class during a fitness test. And,
Yeah.
we were out there doing the 1 mile run, and I know I was the fastest one in a class, but the gym teacher told me, he was like, man, you should have been out there for the cross country team. They could have used you. You probably could have scored all state. And I'm like, man, I ain't hearing all that. And this was my junior year during the fall, so I wasn't running cross country track or anything. I wasn't even exposed to any running to that extent. But I've always had like an endurance base. So
Yeah.
I played JV football, and I went to Cody High School before I transferred to Henry Ford as a junior. And
Okay.
during my years of JV football at Cody High School, the football coaches used to say, "Hey, run a world," it was about 1.5 miles, just running the block, running around,
Yeah.
half a mile one way, half a mile, quarter mile the other way, half a mile back, and whatever. And I used to always be the first one, and it was just easy for me, so just running. And so after I transferred from Cody to Henry Ford, I didn't do football because Henry Ford was a really good football team during those years that I went there. And transferring from the not having a summer and things like that, I just didn't feel comfortable trying out for that team. So then I kind of got into the street stuff. So I was, even as a 15, 16-year-old, doing stuff I wasn't supposed to be doing, like, smoking and drinking. So I was out of shape, but I was still in enough shape to run about, I think, a 5:30 mile or something like that, which isn't great. But for a gym teacher to see, like, this kid just go out there and run 5:30 when everybody else is running like 8, 9 minutes, he's like, man, you got some potential.
Right.
So, I'm like, okay, yeah, I hear you. I eventually went out for track that spring. So I think I started up in when does track season start here in Michigan? April, late March.
Like that. Yeah, usually like the second week of March, and middle part of March, when we have that new start, and then we have that 2 week period where we can't do nothing, or competition wise,
Yeah, so I was something like that. So I kind of went through the motions of running and figuring it out, and then my first day of track practice, I think it might have been late February or something like that. We did a workout, and I kicked the workout's butt, man. I had a pretty good teammate, Jonathan Orr. He ended up going to Wisconsin for football, but he had great work ethic, and he put it on me on that workout. And I went home, after all those bad habits, and I slept the whole day. I was out, man. I threw up, and through me just feeling like crap, I told myself, like, hey, I think I can be pretty good at this. So if I'm going to continue it, I have to stop all of this stuff. Stayed with track, kept doing that all my junior year. Ended up making a state meet running 4:28. First year out running track, and the first athlete from my school to make the state meet in I don't know how many years. So kind of made track cool at Henry Ford for that year. Then my senior year, still was a late bloomer. Didn't do summer track because I wanted money in my pocket. But I did come back the next season and ran cross country. So won a city championship in cross country. Didn't run the regional meet or the state meet because, again, young, not knowing any better, wanted to make extra money, and I didn't want to take the ACT. Oh, I wanted to take the free ACT. I wasn't trying to pay any money for the ACT. So took the free ACT, didn't run regional, so that means I didn't run a state meet. Fast forward a little bit, got with his club coach, Coach Furman Tate. I don't know if you know him, but he had Swift Track Club here a few years ago.
I remember that club. Yeah, definitely.
Yeah, so he hunted me down, man. He saw me at the city meet the previous year and was trying to get me to run for a summer track club. Went to one practice and he didn't show up. I'm like, man, I ain't running summer track anymore. I'm making this money. But he finally got me at the city state meet. It was like, hey, you gonna run indoor for me? Got me running indoor with him. Was doing okay. You know, taught me about pacing. Taught me about just being a good middle distance runner. Man, I really thank him for coming and bringing me under his wing, because before him, I was just a kid running with no guidance, just out there.
Right.
Like, hey, I'm going to go. I was one of those, the typical black distance runner. Like, hey, I'm going to go out in 60 and see if I can hold on. So, you know, my splits would be something like 60 and then 70 and then 70 and then end up going 430 when I could have ran, you know,
right.
420 or something. So he taught me about pacing, you know, and really helped propel me in the track and field world. So, you know, my senior year with him, ran indoor for the first time, got down to 2 minutes in the half a mile indoor, which the previous year I only ran like 2:12, and I ran 4:20, 4:25 or something like that for the full mile indoor. So, you know, he one of the great things about Tate is he, like, gave me confidence. Like, he saw me already have a little bit of confidence, but he talked me up, and he helped me really believe in myself. So I had big goals after that. After that indoor season, like, man, I'm about to win the outdoor state meet. I started hearing about guys like Alan Webb running off fast and stuff like that. And my senior year in high school, Dathan Ritzenheim from Rockford was also like a 4:05 miler. So I'm like, man, I'm going to beat this dude. I'm going to do it all. So none of that happened, but I still ended up pretty well. I ran 4:17. Yeah, I ran 4:17 for the 1600 and 1:53 for the half mile. You know, I was fifth in the 1500, you know, only being my second year running track. I was happy with that. And I was second in the 800. Actually led most of the 800 into the last 700 until a guy passed me. So had a pretty, you know, really good, you know, senior year. But that was really my start in the sport. It was just like one day not running at all, always having the talent to, after one workout, going home, throwing up, being sick, and just telling myself, like, hey, if I'm going to be good in this, I got to everything I got into it.
Wow. That's crazy, man. You know, I come from a football background, so when I took over as cross country, first of all, people thought I was nuts. You know, like, first but nuts on two levels. Nuts, like, who walks away from an offensive coordinator position to coach girls cross country? You know, like, who does that? And then from the other perspective, like, what do you know about distance running? Because you're a football guy. You know, so I'm always amazed by, you know, the stories. And then, like I said, I learned to appreciate the toughness of a distance runner real quick, because I just know, like, the steadfastness of the girls on my team, like, the workouts I put them through. If I was to ask high school Ro to do that, man, I might have snapped. I might have snapped. And, like, you know, coach might have been all kinds of different names, and I would have probably went home. Like, dude, I'm not doing that.
Are you crazy, man? I ain't doing that. Yeah, exactly.
It's like, bro, I run straightaways. You know, so I'm always appreciating a distance runner, and I've just learned to love and my love of it has grown so much. It's just crazy.
Yes.
Talking about how I got involved in sport. I grew up in Jamaica.
Yeah.
And as a young man coming up, you know, all we used to hear about was Donald Quarry. So that's kind of dating me a little bit. You know, running the 100 and the 200. And everybody at that time wanted to be a 100 and 200 guy because they wanted to be like Donald Quarry. And, so I carried that with me when I came here to the States. I mean, there's a bunch of stories I could tell you. I remember from field day in Jamaica, first, second, third grade. But when I got here to the States, man, I thought I was the bomb. I was man, you couldn't catch me in tag. I mean, we had the races. I mean, I just felt like I was running on cloud nine, man, compared to some of these kids. Until I got to about high school, and I knew I was fast, but I struggled with the fact that I wasn't a 100 and 200 meter guy, and I think I probably, if I had to do it all over again, I probably would have been a decathlete. Because I was really good in hurdles. I had good range, but I wasn't like the dominant 10-5, 10-4 guy that you needed to be in high school, even back then, to be taken seriously, to take the sport seriously to the next level. So I think my claim to fame was the 400 hurdles and the 800. And my conversations with my coach led me to, and he was also another interesting guy. Had lots of unique perspectives that helped shape me today as a coach. But he was one of the first guys that put the idea in my head that the 400 and the 800 was a natural double instead of the 800, 1600, and referenced Alberto Wantarena and some of the studies that have been done by guys like Dr. Frank Horwell out in England about taking a speed-based approach to training, the middle distances. When we're in America, especially during the 70s and 80s, America was knee-deep and still is knee-deep, I think, significantly influenced by, an aerobics-based philosophy through training guys, 800 meters and up.
Yeah.
So, that was really interesting. But anyway, I didn't mean to jump 2 feet into the.
No, you good, man. You good. This is why we do this, though. I mean, that's the whole reason why we do this. Just go for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Rohan, when you came to the States, did you move to the Philly area?
No, I lived in New York.
Oh.
So I went to New York. I went to one of the top specialized high schools in New York at the time. Still is to this day, Brooklyn Tech. And then,
Brooklyn Tech. Yep. Yeah.
Yeah. And then from there I ran track under Lenny Malik, who he was my head coach, but really interesting guy. Even to this day, we still talk often. Inspirational in the types of things that he was doing back then. He was the first girls commissioner for women's track and field in the 70s. Was one of the guys that spearheaded, a lot of opportunities for girls track and field, and had a couple of teams that were national champions as well as national record holders for the 4x4 and the 4x8. Again, we're talking about like between 77 or 76 and 82. He had like those teams, especially on the women's side, were really, really strong. And then after his coach, the head coach of both programs left, he became the boys coach at Brooklyn Tech and went on to win like 26 city championships.
Yeah.
Wow.
In New York, and actually in my senior year, we had the second fastest 4x8 in the country, which I ran on, and the only team that was actually faster than us that year was P.C. Williams.
Okay.
P.C. Williams. I'll stick a pin in that thought, but as a result, I've had a very interesting relationship with T.C. Williams from that point forward. So I love the school, love what they've done. Yeah, T.C. Williams.
Okay, nice.
So how did you guys each transition from, athletes in the sport to coaching?
Oof.
You go first, Ronnie.
I mean, I can go first, too, because I think we all have interesting stories. So, I mean, I'd love to hear where everybody got theirs from.
Yeah. Okay. So from an athlete standpoint to a coach, I had kind of, it was a direct process, but it also wasn't a direct process to get me to where I am now. When I first graduated from college, I still didn't know what I wanted to do, and coaching wasn't necessarily one of those things that I thought I wanted to do. I think I was always pretty good with people, and my girl I was dating at the time used to always call me a social worker and things like that because I used to try to solve people's problems. And I kind of ran with that, man. I was like, okay, yeah, I'm going to be a social worker. So I didn't get into some of the school of social works I wanted to do. So I started to work at a boys' home, Wolverine Human Services down in downtown Detroit, working with abused, neglected, and delinquent young men, just to get some real-world experience in that field and see if that's something that I actually want to go to school for anyway. So I was doing that, but at the same time I was doing that, I was like the head coach for women's cross country at my alma mater at Henry Ford High School in Detroit. But I was coaching really just for the extra money. I mean, I graduated making, $10 an hour, so I was like, man, I can use this extra money that they're going to give me to coach this cross-country season. So it wasn't necessarily something that I thought I was passionate about at the time. Didn't like working at the boys' home, quit that job, tried to sell homes. That didn't work. And then I was, selling cell phones for about 6 or 7 months. I was one of those dudes that, you ever been to the mall and, it's somebody at the kiosk that's like, yo, my man, hey, what type of phone you got? I was that guy. I was that harassing guy, like just harassing the mess out of people. But I was also a manager of doing that. So I made pretty good money doing that. But then it was something that I was working long days, long nights, and it wasn't really fun. So it was like, man, I'm getting good money, but not enjoying this. And I think the icing on the cake was my boy made the Pro Bowl one of those years. I can't remember what year that was. It might have been 2007. But he made the Pro Bowl, and I flew out there to Hawaii, to celebrate with him. So a couple of us flew out there, and I'm sitting out there in Hawaii just looking around a whole bunch of people that's doing what they love. Like, they get paid, but it's like people that do what they love. And I'm like, I sat back and I asked myself, like, man, what do I love to do? And what I came back to was the sport of track. Like, I loved running when I was doing it, so I'm going to give myself another chance. And it was 2007 because I was thinking about the 2008 Olympic trials, trying to make that. So gave myself a chance, quit my job like the next week, was living off of savings for that next year, got back into running. And, of course, after you take about a year or two off from running, it's a long journey back. And, right. I'm getting my butt kicked in practice with guys like Nate Brannon and Nick Willis. And I started, that year, 2007 didn't really go too good for me, but 2008 went better. But it still wasn't good enough to make the trials. But then at that point, I refound my passion for the sport. And I'm like, how do I stay in this sport with this passion that I have, knowing that I'm never going to make the amount of money to be successful to live off of? Like, I was a substitute teacher. I'm like, I'm not going to just keep training and being a substitute teacher just to get by and keep training. Like, I have to do something a little more fruitful for myself. And then that's when the coaching aspect kind of got introduced to me. Ronnie, my college coach, was like, hey, Nate's not going to be helping us. If you want to stick around and hang out with us some, and you can be our volunteer coach. I'm like, great. And then the men's head coach at the time, Fred LaPlante, he was like, yeah, I got 4 or 5 800-meter guys. We don't really know what to do with them. As a head coach now, my hands are full. I can't really deal with them. Ronnie got the other middle distance guys, and he could deal with them, but you take them. So as a volunteer, I got like 3 or 4 guys that, with very little oversight, I was able to design all of their training. So that for me, that was kind of my introduction back into coaching and coming back to, kind of get me to where I am now.
How about you, Rohan?
Well, long story short, I put the less traditional path, but I shouldn't say that, because I've seen a number of coaches as of late whose story is, I think, parallel mine. I worked in corporate, and eventually started my own business. And while I moved to the Philadelphia area in about 2004 or so, and I had got my daughter involved in youth athletics, as most parents do, with kids that are trying to find themselves. Say, hey, try this, so on and so forth. In fact, think you're going to be good at track too. Why don't you try this? So I got involved in a local youth club, and I started volunteering. And in the process of volunteering, similar to Ronnie, found out that there was a seed lying dormant there, this passion for the sport, the desire to train and shape and develop young future athletes. And, the one thing I learned really early on is that if you're going to be successful as a coach, you can't coach your own kid.
Man.
So for all those parents out there who aspiring to coach your own kids, take it from me. You don't want to coach your own kid.
Mm-hmm.
Had to stand by and, let other folks coach her. And in the process, learned about, how the value of sharing. So seeing other parents who entrusted me to work with their kids, and at the same time, I entrusted the other coaches that I collaborated with to coach my daughter. It was a great experience for me. And from that point forward, I really started looking at track and field as I would a business opportunity. And one of the things that struck me immediately was the fact that if track and field were a business, it was still stuck in the industrial age, while the rest of the sporting world had moved on into the information age. Right. And what I mean by that is that there was very little sharing and collaboration. And again, we're talking just mid-2000s. There was very little sharing in a global sense of information and training ideas. A lot of that stuff was just being laid down at that time. And you had USATF starting to come out with level 1, level 2 courses at that time. But the majority of stuff, again, pre-internet, was basically kept within a very small community of coaches that shared ideas and talked basically to each other. And I think in many ways you still see the remnants of that structure today in terms of how coaches communicate and exchange ideas. We've done a lot better. But for me at that time, I said, hey, you know what, there's an opportunity here. There are best practices, there are ideas out there that if somebody actually took the time to sit down and architected these thoughts and put them together in a coherent fashion, that the next generation of athletes could really benefit from the structuring and the dissemination of that type of information. So that started the framework of the company and the club that I have right now called Maveric. And what Maveric represents is an introduction to young athletes about the concepts of periodization, not in the performance-centric manner that most people look at periodization today, meaning that you got to do this if you want to run fast at this time of the season, so on and so forth. When you read the works of Bumpa and the guys that put down the framework for periodization, it was really about how to sequence physical preparation in order to maximize the stimulation and the response in the body. So so again, trying to take a complex idea like that and present it in a way that young kids, young athletes, emerging athletes could digest was my challenge. The challenge I gave myself, and Maveric was the fruit of that. So Maveric represents our 5-cycled training model for educating athletes: mobility, acceleration, velocity, endurance, and recovery. And those 5 themes govern our entire year in terms of how we structure our training and how we talk to our athletes while we're in each one of those training themes, those training verticals. So, when I initially came out with the idea, it was like, well, how are you going to get your athletes to run fast if you got them thinking and talking about this? And, and the realization that I came was that, well, running fast is really something that you help an athlete to overcome when you strip away the things that are preventing them from running fast, right? So you'll have a lot of coaches that will approach the idea that in order to run fast, you need to run fast. Mm-hmm. And while that's true, the caveat in the equation is that you will only run as fast as your limitations allow you to run fast. Mm-hmm. So if you are training and you're doing all the right things, you're lifting weights, you're doing acceleration work, you're doing plyometrics, but you have poor mobility, which is the first thing in Maveric that we address, you're an athlete that eventually is going to hit a significant physical roadblock and or get injured, right? And you see that so many athletes, they're compensating, they try to compensate for poor movement patterns, and later in their career, then they go on to see the guru of biomechanics, the guy down in Florida that has the book out on biomechanics. What's his name again? Dr. Ralph Mann.
Mm. Oh, yeah.
Right. So they go to see Dr. Ralph Mann, but now you have 10, 15 years of rehearsing a poor movement pattern, and you want Dr. Ralph Mann to fix that issue in the 5th or 6th year of your professional career,
right?
Yeah. On top of the 8 years that you ran in high school and college,
right?
Right?
Yep.
That's the American model. And I'm saying, well, why not take the Ralph Mann principles and teach them to somebody who has greater plasticity, greater elasticity, his ability to absorb and apply technical models and concepts is higher because he doesn't have to unlearn any bad habits, and then build all those other components on top of it, right? So in our context of Maverick, mobility is the first thing we address. Before we do any work associated with acceleration or strength or overcoming inertia or any of those other things, you've got to understand how to move, and you've got to establish a very high quality of movement, right? And it's as much for maximizing the athlete's future performance as it is to minimize the athlete's potential for injury.
Yeah.
But again, is this a program that would be, helpful at the collegiate level? I mean, I've done some volunteer work. I did some work at Cheney for I think 2 years, and I also worked at Lincoln. Both of them historical HBCUs. Both of them claiming to be the first HBCU. So I can honestly say I have had the the honor of working for the first first black university in the country. Whether it's Senior or Lincoln, I've worked for them both. And Cheney, while I was there, I think we wrote like 7 different records in the sprints. At Lincoln, when I went there, our 4x4 ran the fastest time that they had ran in the previous 7 years. So I mean, there's something to be said for the process. And currently, I coach at a boarding school here in PA, and I also have had a couple of kids who are local to our area that have joined our club. And first year coaching, I had 2 kids that made it to the semifinals at nationals in the 60. Second year, I think we were the only school in the country that did that, as a matter of fact. And we only have 135 boys. So really, really small school.
Wow.
The second year, I had 2 4x2 teams that made it to nationals. Both of them, I think, one went 130, the second one went 129. And the one that went 129, I think, ended up running the 5th fastest time in the history of the state of PA. And then the following year, this past year, I had that team go 128. They were 7th in the nation in the 4x2, and I had my first double All-American. He made it to the nationals in national finals in both the 200 and the 400, and ended up being a 6-time state champion indoors and outdoors, double state champion in both the 200 and 400. Indoors and outdoors at here in PA. So not a bad start.
No, not at all. And I really like how the fire seemed to be lit by an idea.
Yeah.
You know, I'm real fascinated by that whole principle because, like I said, I knew when we went to this question, I'm like, all 3 of us are going to have 3 different paths, and I'm just so curious to hear that you always had a love for the sport, but then the coaching part kind of spawns from a progressive idea.
And I'll add one other thing. The fact that I was a parent, I think, significantly influenced and changed me as a coach. I think if I were a younger person, I would probably have a different energy and approach to coaching. As a parent, I realized that I had to slow down and be more methodical and realize that sometimes the initial perception may not be the right answer, and allowing things to happen, especially when you're working with athletes, teach them to be patient, I think, is a significant part of the job. Trust in the process, understanding that the initial investment that they may make will not necessarily give them the returns that they're looking for 2 or 3 weeks down the road, or even within that season. But if they continue to lay the foundation, if they continue to trust in the program, if they continue to trust the process in themselves, that the gains are going to come steady, and they're going to continue to compound.
Yep.
Yeah, like I figured, 3 different stories because mine mine is just different. I got into coaching on accident. That's how I like. Well, it's not really accident. It ended up being very necessary for me, but at that time it was an accident. I was just home working. As a young parent, and my kid was sick. He had cancer, and he had brain surgery and a lot of years of chemotherapy and radiation and things like that. I mean, he's healthy now. They said he wouldn't make it past 7, and dude is 16 years old now. So he's doing great. But at that time when I was going through that stuff, being such a young guy, I'm in my early 20s, I just lost my way, and I was just really just working, hospital, home, work, hospital, home, hospital, home, and I was just off in a weird place. And one of my really close friends that I went to high school with, he was coaching football over at Ann Arbor Pioneer, and he would always bring his game films over just to kind of occupy me and help me take my brain away from stuff. And he was always picking my brain about what should I do, what should I do with this, what should I do with that. And I always found myself giving him drills and things that he could do with his football team. And so he got through the football season, and he felt he saw a lot of significant improvement with his kids. And he was like, I'm just talking. I congratulated him, and he was like, dude, don't you realize you should be coaching? And I'm like, I don't know, man. Kind of reluctant. And he actually went to the high school I graduated from, because by that time football season was over, so they were transitioning over into the indoor track season. And he went to my high school coach. He was like, "You need to hire Rolando as a volunteer assistant coach. You need to bring him on." And he had to kind of twist my arm because, like I said, I didn't feel like doing nothing. I was just kind of out there floating around. And I showed up, and my buddy Chris Yee that I ran with in high school, you ran with him, didn't you, Ronnie?
Yeah, I ran with him. Yeah.
Yeah. So Yee's my guy from like '95,
Okay.
and he was coaching there at the time too. And so I just started. I showed up. I remember I remember the day just reluctant. I was walking in to Pioneer's front doors. It was winter break, so nobody was there, and I'm just like, do I really want to do this? Do I really want to put myself out there like this right now? Because I've always been kind of a quieter person, but at that point, I just wasn't talking. At that point, I was just not talking. I was just kind of someplace else. And within 20 minutes, I caught the bug.
Wow. Yeah.
Within 20 minutes of just being there, being back around it, I absolutely caught the bug. And it was cool because I slowly, I slowly felt myself coming back, to the point where I'm talking to my mom, and my mom is like, this coaching thing is right for you because you're back to yourself again. And you got a little smile again. And smile is relative because people that know me, I don't really smile too often. It's not my fault. It's a genetic trait. I apologize for it. But she recognized that it brought me back, and I just ran with it. I started as a volunteer assistant at Pioneer, and then I was one of those eager guys that was just like, Coach, I appreciate you giving me these JV guys, but I can do more. Yeah. And then every time it's like, I can do more, I can do more. And then I just, I'm a daydreamer a little bit too, so I started planning ahead. So I tried to start writing workout plans and starting to do lineups, but I wasn't telling coach because I'm like, man, I'm in this like 2.5 months. Why is he gonna listen to me? And thankful he did. I give the credit to Don Sleeman, man. He did. He started recognizing that I had an aptitude for it, and I was working hard. I ran for him in high school, and I was lazy. And so him now seeing me as an adult, I had become driven, and so he allowed me to just grow little by little. Then a few years in, he was coming at me, asking me to, start doing meet registration, and very slowly grooming me for a head coaching position.
Yeah.
Doing a lot of little things like, well, what do you think about the workouts today? Well, give me your input on this relay lineup. It's almost relinquishing control. And this guy had been coaching at Ann Arbor Pioneer since 1968. So that's something on his part to just even recognize it and then, be able to accept a green guy's idea, basically. And I started moving up from the JVs, and then I was able to take over the hurdlers. And then that's when I really started to, find my groove. I know one of the best years we had over there at Pioneer, I can't remember exactly what year, maybe '09 or 2010 maybe. We had 5 guys in the regional final in the 110 hurdles.
Wow.
Yeah, and we scored 5 out of the 8 places. That year, the guys went down to New Balance and won the shuttle hurdles. And so I was just like, okay, I'm really, I'm starting to hit my groove. And then all the while I'm coaching football this whole time too. And somewhere around that time, 2010, 2011, I don't know how it hit me, but I was just like, my days of coaching football are coming to an end. I don't know why, I don't know how, but I can feel it. And I left Ann Arbor Pioneer, came to Ann Arbor Skyline as a football coach still, the offensive coordinator, and the girls track coach job was open. And I had never coached females before, and I'm just like, God, I just don't know. I was like, I don't know if I can do this, like, because I had a football coach's approach to coaching track, if you understand what I'm saying. I'm a little too intense sometimes, and things could get a little bit loud. But I was so worried that I just didn't have the temperament for it. Mm-hmm. But I just said, screw it. I'm going to just give it a shot. And I'm very thankful to the AD at Skyline at the time, John Young. I had an interview, and one of the questions was, so tell us how you would go about, with teaching hurdlers, because, we haven't really had hurdle coaches here, and we have hurdle athletes. And I literally chuckled a little bit. It was like, so you want me to talk about hurdles after what I just went through at Pioneer with all that success? And I think I blacked out, went on like a 5-minute rant about hurdles and progressions and drills and things like that. And I think that was what got me hired. And then from there, I started having a lot of success with the girls pretty much right out the gate. We never won a meet ever in school history. We won our first dual meet right out the gate, and things started to progress. And then I felt that fire. I felt that football fire kind of extinguished at that point. Mm. Like it just went away. And our cross country job came open, and I took that. Well, I didn't take it. I'm sorry. I interviewed for it, and which was it was a hilarious interview at that, because talk about blowing smoke, right? I'm a sprinter, football guy, and I'm talking about distance training and a whole different monster. And then one of the parents, I remember, asked me, like, so that all sounds good, but you never actually ran cross, did you? And I'm like, well, thanks for putting me out there like that. No, I didn't. But again, the AD he had faith, and he gave me a shot, and here I am 3 years later. And so I know for me, it's been interesting coaching outside of my discipline. And I know you do the same thing, Ronnie, as the head coach of the track program as well as the cross, being a distance runner yourself. What is that like for you?
Man, it was funny. That's a very funny question, because now this is my first year actually coaching distance since I've been coaching, outside of those 4 800-meter guys. But this is my first 2 years. Last year was my first year coaching distance since I've been a collegiate coach. My very first job as a grad assistant, as a paid grad assistant at St. Francis University, it's kind of, one of those good old boy networks. The coach there knew my coaches. My coaches raved about me, my work ethic, and, my personality. So he liked that part of me. I was somebody that he felt he can trust. But he called me up and was like, hey, you don't really have to interview. I got this spot open. It only pays $5,000 for the whole year, so I'm not really putting it out there right now. I just want some young guys that want to come in and grind for me and work. And by the way, I'm the distance coach, so if you want to work for me, you got to learn how to coach something else. So that was the first introduction to me to coaching something else. I was like, I just want to coach, so I'm like, I'll do whatever. If you want me to coach throws, whatever. He was like, no, I got a throws coach, but you got to coach my jumpers and my sprinters. So I took a level 1 class just to get some basic knowledge about coaching the sprints, but the biggest adjustment for me was the day-to-day for sprints, hurdles, and jumps versus the day-to-day for the distance runners, because, for distance runners, some of those days, it might be one quality session of a week to where you're doing repeat intervals or an extended tempo or something of that nature, to where it's actually a workout to where I'm holding a stopwatch and telling them what they should and shouldn't be doing during that time. A lot of days throughout the week, it could just be an aerobic-based run to where they're out running on the roads. And I don't run as much anymore, so they're out of sight for me at that time. With sprinters, every day on the track there's something. It's not. I don't never prescribe to my sprinters to say, hey, go for a 30-minute run and come back. Like, every day with them is a day-to-day teaching moment. And not saying it's not a day-to-day teaching moment with distance, but with sprinters, it's a little more attention to those type of details.
Right.
So that was really the biggest adjustment. But it was also an adjustment coming back here from 6 years of working with sprinters and just a couple of middle distance runners to working now, getting back into the groove of not just middle distance runners, but longer distance runners and cross country. And really one of the criticisms that I heard about myself was that I'm only a middle distance coach. And, that kind of made me chuckle because it's like, how is somebody that never met me going to label me what I am based off of what I did as an athlete and, not necessarily having any knowledge on, the coaching education I put myself through, the time and investment that I put myself through to be a better all-around coach in anything I do, whether it's sprints and hurdles, whether it's jumps, I haven't did anything in throws, but if I had to coach the throws, I would learn about the throws just like I do anything. So, and I did that same thing with the distance events. It's a funny transition from being a distance runner to a sprinter to a sprints coach to back now to being a sprints coach and a distance coach. But I try to keep myself, not put myself in necessarily a box. I try to think of track more so like football and basketball. Like you might have a head football coach that has a specialty in the defense or the offense, but you got to know a little bit of everything to be a head football coach. You got to know what's going on the offense, on the defense, on the special teams, and all of that. So that's where I look at myself as just a track and field coach.
Yeah. Now, Rohan, do you at all work with distance runners within either at the boarding school or with the club?
Well, yes and no. Because of the nature of our boarding school, where we have kids who are coming from literally the four corners of the earth, cross country for us is not a competitive season because the foundation, we've not had an opportunity to really lay down the type of foundation I think that competitive distance programs require. Pennsylvania has a rich history in distance running, and every year they represent very competitively at the national level because of this shared continued history of producing successful national caliber athletes. So these guys that are training here during summertime, they're really putting down a significant base and working on establishing the foundation that will enable them to run quality times during the fall and into winter. Our kids are coming in, they're fulfilling the requirements for cross country, but my head coach and I think our focus is, where our bread is being buttered is at the sprints from 400 meters and down. So we've got a couple of kids on the team that I've been steadily working with, but without the culture to support the formation and the maintenance of a distance culture, which I think is significantly different from working with sprinters. We just haven't been able to. We haven't been able to do that. I haven't had the good fortune that Ronnie has had.
That's a great point, though. I never really. I'm simple for not thinking about it, but that's a great point. If you got kids at a boarding school who are coming from all over the place, they go home for the summer, and a lot of the foundation for cross country is set during the summer.
Yeah. And I will even say the culture of the team is formed during the summer.
Yeah.
So, seeing those guys going out on the long runs and the bonding that they create during that time, when September rolls around and they're ready to go on, the 3-point-mile run, they're running as a group. And they're trying to get as close to 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 as possible. And you have 20, 30 teams that have the same vision and goal in mind. Mm-hmm. If you're starting to compete in September, one guy might be 17, you might have another guy at 18, and the rest are like 21. No.
Yeah. And I think with that distance culture, that's one of the things I wish, and that was a big transition for me coming from a different institution to coming to Wayne State, is just trying to get them to understand that summertime importance, and not just putting in the miles, but putting in the right type of miles, and so you can come into camp about at the same fitness, and So I've experienced it right now to where some of my girls. I think I got a very talented group of girls. It's not a big team, but I think the overall on paper talent is there. But the actual conditioning of each of my athletes is not there to where it could be. Because if I can get 7 of these girls to be where they could be as far as conditioning, even 7 weeks into the season right now, if they would have all came in together, I think we could have been one of those surprise dark horse teams. So yeah, that summertime mentality is something that's very important.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And I like what you said there about not just miles, but quality miles.
Yeah.
Because I know that was something that I was a part of my transition that I had to understand too. Was just that you can go do a 6-mile run and it can be a complete waste of time.
Yep.
Yeah. Like it can be an absolute waste of time if it's not done correctly.
Yeah.
And so I find that interesting. With getting kids to just follow instructions. I know, like, this is one of the biggest things that I've learned. When I went from coaching football and boys track to girls track and girls cross country, I have just noticed that I'm not even going to sugarcoat it. Girls just listen more.
Yeah.
Let's just be honest. Like, I've calmed down so much. The running joke is my blood pressure goes down significantly every single time I go over in the cross country season because of the type of kid. But just not just that type of kid, but also, like I said, dealing between male and female athletes. What do you guys find to be the difference? Because I know I'm still learning on how to approach that because it's very different, not just from a training perspective, but also from a personality on how your personality is, how they are, what triggers them, motivating things, all that.
Oh boy,
I'm gonna let Rohan go on that one. I'm gonna let Rohan
who's gonna jump in first with that one? Come on.
I'm gonna let